Is there a red dot on it?
Yep.
Okay, that means it's going.
Okay.
Look in the window.
The red one was looking at the dining room.
Hmm.
Okay, first and foremost, how do you define documentary and set it apart from other nonfiction stories?
In film and video, a documentary is about professing a personal viewpoint. That personal viewpoint is either the person who is the producer and putting the money up for it, or it's the person that's given you money to make a documentary. If it's a corporation, the documentary from the corporate standpoint is we want to tell you about our company, usually the best things about our company so that people will think better of us. If it's an organization, let's say a medical school, and they want a documentary done on their doctors who are out in the field doing good work to show that the medical university is doing a good job and is important to the community. And if it's personal, then that's usually someone who is angry or excited about the topic. If you're angry about it, let's say it's a Michael Moore, and it's about terrorism, or it's about one of his other topics like owning guns, or General Motors, which started him out. If you're just interested in it, it could be a question that you'd like answered. The documentary that just came out a couple of years ago about fast food and its nutritional value started out probably as a little bit of anger, but also I think the guy wanted to find out what is the nutritional value of food. I'd like to know. I think that pretty much answers that first question.
Okay, does documentary film have a purpose, or does it always need a reason to exist?
Yeah, documentary films always need a reason to exist, so that when the program's over, the person who's watching it can say, why did they do that? Here's why I think they did that. We want to know why someone's going to all that effort to produce a documentary, because documentaries are extraordinarily time-consuming, mostly because they don't have large crews. They don't have the Hollywood system behind them, for the most part. It's a much smaller crew, and the amount of work is spread out over a smaller number of people. So there's a great deal of effort involved.
Does a documentary involve a script? And if it does, I don't understand how it could if it's a documentary.
Documentaries can have scripts. That's because the person who is doing the documentary, the group, says, here's what the message is that we know exists, and now we're going to go out and look for substantiation in the form of interviews, documents, and other forms of information that support what we're trying to say. The plainest, probably most basic form of documentary involves someone who has a question that he or she wants answered. And that question involves discovery. And in discovery, it's like picking up a thread, and you follow the thread to where the information goes. You start with one place that you know or you think the information may come from, and then you take notes. And you say, who else is a subject matter expert on this topic, or who else can inform us or enlighten us, and then we go there. And then, like a pebble in a pond, the ripples spread out, and you find yourself going to a number of places, a number of people to talk to, a number of things to look at. If you're doing a script, you can of course do that. Al Gore, the video on Al Gore that won the Academy Award was, we know what he's going to say. We've seen him do it before. So what we're going to do now is we're going to document his presentation. And because of that, here's what we're going to need to put in it. But most of the scripting doesn't take place beforehand. Most of the scripting takes place afterwards. If you look at a television program on PBS like Frontline, they do not allow the interviews to complete their story. They have segments of interviews that they write segues for, to get you from one to the other, to orient your information so that the next subject coming up has an impact based upon what you've already seen. But that scripting takes place after you've done your shooting for the most part.
You did the documentary Blood Brothers. What prompted you to do that documentary?
I've done a number of documentaries for corporations. I produced the official video history of General Motors. That was a corporate documentary. And that started out as 7 or 8 segments that were used as speech support for the CEO during one of his yearly addresses. And they wanted a history of their corporation, which after the program, the speeches were done, I sewed together and they used in their corporate headquarters somewhere for the purpose of showing to the public. We at Blackbird have also done a few documentaries. One of them was for women who were HIV positive. That was funded by a medical school that said, we need to get the word out to women who find themselves in the position of being diagnosed with potential for AIDS and are in the stage of HIV. They need to know what their opportunities are, what their choices are, and how they should be living. What they wanted was something that didn't say you're dead. At the time, the reason the medical facility wanted that was doctors were giving that diagnosis without benefit of any bedside manner or caring for the most part. Ma'am, your tests are back. I'm sorry to tell you you've got HIV. There are opportunities out there in the community and I wish you luck. And the medical school said, we need something more than that. For 3 summers in a row, starting in 2010, that'd be 10, 11, and 12, I followed bicycles either across country or through various parts of the state of Missouri to document their cross-country bicycle ride to support the concept of cycling for change, which was to reduce poverty in the United States by 2020, as proposed by Catholic Charities of America. Blood Brothers, which we produced, both of us, you and I, the person I'm talking to, the teacher, started out with the medical center that supported us for the AIDS program, HIV program, said, do you have any other ideas? We'd like to do something else again. The HIV program was really well received and did a great deal of good for the medical school. When they asked us, me especially, what is it I was interested in, I said, here's what I want to know. I live in St. Louis. We have a crime rate that's comparable to Detroit, Chicago, parts of LA, New York, and more tellingly, third world countries, Belize, Honduras, that are not first world nations like we are, third world nations, and yet we compare quite favorably to them when it comes to gun violence, murder and mayhem. I said, here's what I want to know. How can a 12 or 13-year-old boy, and they're almost always boys, decide that he will pick up a gun, aim at somebody else, and shoot that person? How does that happen? If you go into the Army, it takes a lot of effort to train a person how to kill someone. These children have no training, or do they? And that was my question. And they said, good question. Write that up. So we did in the form of a proposal, a formal proposal with what we thought we were going to find out, who we wanted to talk to, what it was going to cost. And you have to do that in the beginning. You have to have a concept, an idea, a place to go. You may not go there, but you've got to have some place to begin and some place you're looking to go.
Very good. You mentioned that the funding came from the medical center on the 2 medical documentaries. You're not addressing the funding on the bicyclists. But in a larger sense, as a documentarian, what does somebody do who for funding? I mean, I know there's Kickstarter, there's all this stuff. I mean, what are your thoughts about funding?
Kickstarter is one of the best. If you can align yourself to if you are interested in a topic that already exists, that is being explored by an organization, a corporation, a company, or a group of people, and it's a topic that many people find interesting, and that's what Kickstarter is all about. You gather people who find your topic, what you're trying to do, interesting. If it is other forms, for me it was the medical center, because this was the thread that connected it. The National Centers for Disease considers gun violence a disease. It considers it a disease according to their definitions. It impacts the community. It transfers from one person to another, much like an infectious disease does, and it causes great harm, needing study and remediation, meaning it needs some way to fix it. For a corporation, if you want to do a documentary on a topic that corporation finds interested in, many corporations do pro bono funding for things they're interested in. It's part of why a corporation gives money, so that in the public eye they look like they're involved. Other than just taking money in, they're also giving back. You find corporations that are interested in your topic, or you find a topic that they're interested in and say, I want to do something about that. There are ways to look for funding. There have been books out. There have been, I'm sure on the internet now, you can, if you go past page 4 or 5, you can start finding places of experiences that people said, here's how I did it. But first of all, you have to have a catch. You have to have a hook for the fish. And you have to bait it with being able to explain it well, tell it well, have some passion about it, and show that it will have some effect. You have to do that.
Where do ideas for documentaries come from?
Ideas for documentaries, if what you do is you just like the idea of revelation and exploration of an idea, just pick up a week's worth of newspapers. If you don't have any ideas on your own, pick up a week's worth of newspapers and read. For example, at the moment, we are heading into another election period. When is it not an election period? But there are certain people who are running for office or commenting on that make for that can make for an interesting exploration of the process. How do we select a person to run? How do we judge them for their capabilities, and do we have respect for them? Let's just take the word respect. You want to do a documentary about respect in politics? Wide open, lots of things to talk about, lots of people to talk about, lots of examples. And ultimately, when it gets done, you can decide if you're going to poke that documentary in a specific direction, or you're simply going to say, this is a news report. What we want to show is the term balanced has been co-opted by at least one news organization, but let's say it's really balanced. Balance it as best you can as to why this current state of respect or disrespect exists. You could do that.
Observational documentary work, like nature photography or nature videography, involves hiding the camera, waiting and hoping that the wolves come by, and you can capture them on tape. But when you were making Blood Brothers, you were not a hidden camera, and yet you want to get at the truth from your subjects. What was your approach? How did you compensate for the fact that it was an artificial situation?
a concept in physics called the Heisenberg principle. I believe it's called it's Heisenberg principle, and that is, if you are watching your topic, if you are involved at all to the point that you can observe your topic, you are influencing your topic. There's nothing that can be done about that. Nothing. You can move in various points and look at it from various directions, but you are influencing your topic by your existence and by being and by observation, just being in the area. Usually in an interview, you can tire, a producer can come in first in a network documentary and tire the person out to the point that they're just used to it. You know, okay, I got it. I've done this a million times. Camera means nothing to me. Let's just go. The second approach is you get in early, don't think you're going to get anything for quite a while, and keep your camera up and visible. And after a while, the camera becomes invisible. If you don't have that and you're just stepping into an interview for the first time, you sort of get involved in the interview slowly. So after a few minutes and after a provocative question or two, the conversation takes place between the person asking the question and the person answering it. And that gets most people who are not trained in presentation skills or politicians will get involved in talking to you. The third way of doing it, another way of doing it is one of the segments in Blood Brothers involved putting 4 or 5 high school students from 3 different groups around a table on a soundstage. Everything was blocked out, so that if you just looked at the table and looked around, it was all black. Everything was dark from up above. The cameras were placed 15 to 20 feet away from the subjects and put behind things that would sort of hide them. So we minimized the camera completely. And then we had a high key light, which one light above the table reflecting off the table and onto them, and that was it. It's a light that people are used to being in. You know, you go into an office, you turn on the overhead light. Well, this was more dramatic, but it was a single light. So people one light didn't bother them. And after, I'd say it was less than 10 minutes, each of those groups were talking to each other, responding to questions that we had produced and given to one of the people in the group as a moderator. But they were talking to each other, not to someone they didn't know. They were talking to people they knew. And they were in conversations on topics that they all had experience in and viewpoints on. And that was extraordinarily revelatory, maybe one of the strongest segments of the documentary.
In your own documentary, just as you were talking about the high school students, that's a very, very unusual approach. Why did you think that it was important to talk to high school students? I mean, you had, experts from all different fields sort of weighing in on the topic, but I've never seen peers, students, talking about a topic like that. Why did you feel it was so important?
The reason why I wanted to have these groups of high school students talk to one another without having the influence of an older person involved, a mentor, a teacher, someone who had responsibility for them. The reason why I didn't want any of that was, as part of the discovery when we were putting this together, it occurred to me that nobody was asking the children who actually do the crimes or mostly suffer from the crimes what they thought about the crimes. Nobody. We talked to experts, we talked to gangs who are, it's like taking a tour bus. Rather than going and living in an area, you get on a tour bus and they point out gangs. So they say, look at that gang. And if the gang knows that you're looking at them, they look gang-like. They talk gang-like. They give you gang stuff, which doesn't tell you anything, except that they are interested in showing up, showing off, being a gang guy. What I wanted was just kids who've had that experience, who've lived through it, had relatives die as a result, and children who have no idea what that experience is like, to talk about the very same questions, and then we intercut those answers to show what children from various backgrounds and abilities and histories have to say about the very same thing. Does that answer that?
In your documentary, you interview both victims and perpetrators, people who belong to the NRA and people who think that guns, if they could be abolished, should be abolished. But your own opinion didn't really come out. Like, as, say, for example, Michael Moore, you always know where Michael Moore is on a topic. Speak to that. Speak to the fact that, and also you did that in the AIDS and in the bicycle. You did not present your own opinion.
When you are producing a program of any kind, your own opinion will come through. It cannot not help to be. However, my viewpoint and purpose is to minimize it as best that I can, so that the information that you're looking at is truly revelatory rather than propaganda, rather than trying to skew you to a viewpoint that I have. Propaganda is all around us in our lives today, and it's very difficult to filter that out sometimes, because people most often lie about their intentions. The topic fair and balanced was a good one. That was used as an advertising slogan for a program, for an organization that is unbalanced and is unfair. And yet, it is said in an effort to defray the criticism. What I tried to do is not have that viewpoint expressed. Even when we interviewed a couple of people who are NRA members, and when they looked at the program when it was over, they didn't know what my viewpoint was. They said this could be shown to anybody, and it wouldn't result in people raising their arms and rolling around on the ground fighting each other, except perhaps the NRA, because that's a sensitive topic that you can't approach in any form. But for most other people, let's say 99% of other groups could watch this and afterwards discuss it and come to conclusions based upon what they've seen and ask questions that they believe are relevant to the topic. That was very important to me to be able to do. It does not express my personal viewpoint. My personal viewpoint is Michael Moore's on the topic. It's not his, but it has that same kind of strong personal viewpoint. I didn't put that in the show.
Speaking of Michael Moore, I mean, he's pretty front and center in terms of, getting high-profile topics out there. But you know where he's coming from. If you agree with him, you can cheer for him, and if you don't agree with him, you can hardly stand to watch it. What's your opinion about a documentarian putting their own, making the documentary their soapbox and putting their attitude so out in front?
You describe a documentary as being a soapbox, and that's fair. It's fair to have a documentary that's a soapbox. People talk about Al Gore's award-winning documentaries being a soapbox. The thing about a soapbox is you won't go and listen to someone you don't agree with if you know that before you walk in. Most of the time you will not sit and listen to it. You will just say, he doesn't represent me. I don't like him. I don't like her. She's too old. She has bad experiences. He's way too leaning in one direction or the other. So I'm not going to listen to him. I know what he's going to say. I know what he's going to say is a differentiation for a documentary. Michael Moore's documentaries mostly aren't, I don't know what he's going to say. He's there to entertain you on his topic, and to reinforce you in beliefs you already have. Fahrenheit 451, was that his? I mean, I can't remember if that's the title, something like that. Anyway, that grossed almost $250 million worldwide in sales. That shows that the people who, on that topic, which was terrorism, really wanted to see him get in someone's face and ask them about it. Mostly, it was the people who he got in the face of who were sensitive about the topic, didn't want to talk about it. That's what we want to know about. We want someone to pry open that door and make them say things. Unfortunately, when you do that, the person who's responding is in an unfair position and will say things that are not grounded in a fair response, but usually grounded in an angry response. So the information you're getting is emotional, not intellectual to the point of what can be done to solve this, to make a solution to this.
I love that answer. I think the video might have been called Fahrenheit 9/11.
Maybe it was called Fahrenheit 9/11. I can, underneath this, I can put Fahrenheit 9/11.
In your own documentary, Blood Brothers, you addressed a very hot button topic that involves both Second Amendment rights and race and poverty. I mean, those are all hot button topics. What kind of reaction did you get from the different communities or the different demographics that watched your video?
You know, I don't know what the reaction is so far. It hasn't been televised yet. My feeling was that the topics themselves, when they're presented to the community most involved in gun violence and murder, and it's getting quite a bit of spread there. We've put out 1,500 copies so far to people who wanted it, and that's been from England to coast-to-coast, border-to-border. The people who are in the middle of this mayhem would look at this and go, duh. Yeah, so what? What's the big deal? If you step outside of that community and you're in the surrounding community and you're the person that doesn't go there, will not enter that community. And if you do, it's at 12 o'clock noon at a high rate of speed to get through it. Most of the stuff in here are topics that people don't believe. They just simply don't believe it. There was years ago, I remember a story about a person who was talking with a woman who lived in a very large house in a very well-to-do community, talking about hunger in the inner city. And the woman, probably in her own defense, because how can you believe that there's a tragedy happen and say, I don't care, said, I absolutely believe there's no such thing as hunger in the city of St. Louis. There's no one here that's going hungry. There's food in refrigerators. People are eating. Don't tell me that there's hunger. If you take that image, that statement, into the area where there is hunger, all that does is reinforce the stereotype of the rich woman who doesn't care. Most people in the surrounding communities don't want to hear it. It's a call to action that most people are reluctant to join in on and do anything about, for a number of good reasons, mostly reasons that are hard to defend. Why action doesn't take place. The reaction to this program has caused some anger, some strong anger amongst people that I've heard reactions to who don't live there. And those reactions are, well, look, we're doing the best we can. You have to look at these people. It's who they are. It's their circumstances. And that's not true from my viewpoint. And if you watch all 5 segments of the documentary, when you're done, you say, well, there's an answer here. There is an answer. Only I don't give it. I don't say, and turn the page, the last page of this thing is, here's what needs to be done. I don't say it. I'm relying on community reaction to organize that.
Which really addresses my next question, which is, what do you hope is going to happen or change as a result of Blood Brothers being made? And, you know, I guess the question also is, first, your experience, but secondly, you know, does a documentary have to have a goal like that?
Oh no, documentaries can be, the very first one that people point at was Robert Flaherty. It's called Nanook of the North. And what Flaherty did was, went about as far out of your way as you can go and followed Native Americans in the form of American Indians of the North, Eskimos, etc., just to look at their lives and say, how can you live up here? My God, this is so tough. How do you do that? How do you love one another? How do you care? How do you exist? I think the goal of that was to say, much like many other documentaries, look at the wonder in the world. Here's something you don't see. Here's something that I think you should know about. Not that you need to do anything about it. I don't know if there's anything to do about it, but you need to know about it. You should know about it. And here's the opportunity to know about it. Either look at it or don't.
In your documentaries, I have noticed that you don't ever show the interviewer, or we never even hear the interview. Now 60 Minutes does. Why do you feel, you know, was that a conscious decision? And if so, why do you feel like, let's just not hear what the question is?
There's no spokesperson visible in Blood Brothers. There's no personality who's guiding the story and turning to the camera and saying, this is what they said, this is what this means. That indicates that we should look here next, and so let's go there. And it provides the segues and overviews. There's none of that in Blood Brothers. There's no personality unless I would have gotten a celebrity or someone of some stature that I could establish as that spokesperson so that you don't pay attention to them anymore. You have to know who that person is. Who are they talking about? Why are they there? What kind of attitude do they have? What kind of viewpoint do they have? If you get that out of the way up front, you can have a spokesperson tell you the story. Edward R. Murrow, you know, the great voice, the great observer, the great power behind investigation in early television. 60 Minutes, those guys are all personalities. They show up beforehand, they show up afterwards. People ask their opinions of things on other programs. They're personalities. In a program like this, you can, as in Frontline, have a voiceover of a very distinctive voice. And after a while, you know who this voice is, and he's part of the story, and you like that. But if you're only doing a one-off like Blood Brothers is, and you don't have a celebrity, you don't have the voice, you don't have someone recognizable in some fashion that gives it an imprimatur of, this is important, look who we got. You have to find a different way. In Blood Brothers, the interviews the answers are tied from one to the next, to the next, to the next. An answer will play off a previous answer, perhaps in a different way, reinforming it, giving it a new perspective, adding new depth or new information. So there's no narrator. It's the people who are interviewed are telling the story. And linking them together was my choice.
You chose to do Blood Brothers as a 5-part documentary. Talk to me a little bit about how that ended up happening, and, you know, do I need to sit down and watch part 1 through 5 in order, or, you know, what's your thinking?
Blood Brothers is in 5 half-hour segments. I did that for a number of reasons. One was also to conform to if it got on television. But it's difficult because each segment comes with a discussion guide in a written form that allows the person who is moderating the viewing to say, here's some questions about what we've just seen. Let's talk about it. May not be necessary to do that, but it helps guide a discussion. The purpose of Blood Brothers was to start discussions. That's exactly what it was for. And in half-hour chunks, I felt as though an audience could watch that without getting so much information that they would be frustrated. If you watch a two or 2.5 hour documentary, something that happened in minute 27 that occurred to you that you liked, you may have forgotten. It may be it may be it may be over compensated for by another strong element that comes after that, and you forget it. So what I wanted to do was give each of the topics a chance for discussion, a chance for observation, reflection, reaction. I thought that was extremely important to do. They started out being half hour. Oddly, the first time I edited one of the topics and did it in a rough form, the total running time for that segment was just a little bit over 30 minutes. And it's sort of, I mean, I looked at it when it was done and I went, oh my, this is coincidental or serendipity. And as I edited the rest, they all came in between 25 and 35 minutes. Almost always very close to 30 minutes, just naturally. Just by putting it down, putting it in, putting them one after the other. They came in at close to that. I figured that was a message of some kind that said, do it this way. Or the topic itself measured itself out in that natural way. But I conform to that, and I think that's how it can be more effective.
Is there anything that I have not asked you that you want to make sure you get on tape on the topic of documentary? And in general, nonfiction production. I mean, it's not news, it's not, it's the documentary.
If you're doing a fictionalized piece and you've written a script for it and it's going to television or it's going to theaters, it's a business. You're doing it to make money. You are absolutely doing it to make money, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that because that's your income. If you love being a DP, if you love being a production assistant or a sound person, you need to have an income of doing something, doing what you love. So that's a very good thing. Nothing wrong with that. If you're doing a documentary, I think the last thing you want to do is look at the equipment you've got. The very first thing you want to do is look at Errol Morris's documentary on Robert McNamara. He's talking to one person throughout the entire documentary. That's it. Now, granted, the guy's fascinating. Granted, what he has to say to at least a certain age group of people is revelatory and has strong importance and impact. But that was it. He said, what do we want from this guy? How do we want to look at him? How do we want to light him? Oh, okay, lighting. What are we going to do for cameras? And then you follow that thread out and you create your production package. But in the beginning, do you want to wear cameras that have spy glasses in them so when you walk in you can kick in the door and ambush somebody? Or are you looking for ways to have beautifully composed images that support your show so that people watching it are really entertained by that as well as the topic? There are those questions that need to be answered. You can organize yourself around the production. First of all, is what is the topic? How best to get that topic? How best? You mentioned earlier building blinds if you're doing animal photography for nature. Well, you got to know how to do that. Then you got to talk to people and find out where to go to do that well. You just don't get a camera guy and say, go to Africa or go to South America and shoot stuff. You have to find all of that stuff out. And then you say, okay, now this is what we need in order to get that done. That's what a documentary is about. What do we need in order to get this done, in order to do this? In Blood Brothers, we bought our own equipment because I was sort of running out of the good graces of borrowing equipment all the time. And I just said, you know, this will be a lot easier, it'll be a lot cheaper. We'll just buy our own equipment. So that's what we did. You know, we bought a lower end prosumer camera, well, middle of the road prosumer camera, and only the necessary equipment that we felt was necessary to do the interviews well, so they conform to a standard that an audience will watch and say, okay, it's not so bad that it's getting in the way, and it's not so Hollywood that I'm beginning to wonder about it. It just looks competent. And that became sort of the byword. How can we do this competently?
I love these answers.
Are we done? Boy, I hope it worked.
Yeah, I'm not going to turn it off.
Yeah, let me, I want to look at something first.
Watch your mic.
Yeah, I know. I just want to see something. Am I still bouncing a, oh, let's do this. Am I still, yeah, all right, that's still working. Everything was working. Let's see how it turned out.